Hi, this is Marty Schupak for T-Ball America, and you're on the second module on our virtual T-Ball clinic on throwing. And again, we're doing this because we are all kind of being confined to our homes because of this horrific coronavirus. So just bear with it. And, I like to make a positive out of a negative. So see what you can do with your kids that you've never done before. And, make the best of it. I'm sure in another few weeks, we'll all be on the field playing T-ball and baseball and softball. But on throwing, full books or large books could be written just on throwing. And it's a tough thing to teach young T-ballers. The one thing I want to point out, though, is that, and I've seen this coaching older kids, if you're able to teach them the right way, it's good because once they get to be 10, 11, and 12, to break them of the bad habits or the bad techniques is a real challenge. I'm not saying you can't do it, you could, but it takes a lot of work. So try to teach them the right techniques in T-ball or right above T-ball, whatever division it is, coach pitch, or in our local league, we call it the rookies. The one most important thing I want to emphasize, and I've said this over and over again in a lot of my books, is when you're teaching a skill like throwing, try to separate skills. And I always say this, if you're teaching throwing, don't teach catching in the same drill. And if you're teaching catching in one drill, don't teach throwing. Now you might ask, well, how do we do this? And what I like to tell coaches and T-ball parents is that a lot of these drills, you want to have extra baseballs. If your league requires you to use the soft-covered T-balls, that's what you get. But we, as coaches, over the years, we've all put extra money of our own into our team and into our league. And what I tell you, if you're going to put your own money into things, do it into baseballs. So when I'm separating skills thrown from catching, what I'm saying is if you're doing a throwing drill, have the player with a bucket, either throwing into space or throwing against the fence if your league allows it. A lot of leagues don't allow it, even with a soft-covered T-ball, a soft baseball. So make sure you follow your league rules. The other thing I want to mention is you have to separate your kids. Because I'm telling you, I see kids get out there, some young kids, they'll take a ball and some coaches will say, okay, throw it. Their head will wander and they'll just throw it any which way without even looking where they're throwing it. So you want to make sure that you have liberal space between the kids. If you get the use of a full field, use it. And if you have a lot of volunteers and you have to start recruiting volunteers at your parents' meeting or even before that, use your volunteers. Okay, and you have to excuse me if I'm going to do some reading right from the screen, so bear with me. I told you to spread the kids out liberally. Utilize as much space as you can. Now, the throwing motion itself, I mentioned this in the introduction. You might see some 5-year-old kids more developed than 6-year-old kids. There could be a couple of factors for that. One factor could be they just develop naturally a little faster. It happens. Another factor could be is that these 5-year-old kids have an older brother or sister or both that are baseball players at 11 and 12, and they're constantly outside with them playing baseball or softball. This will influence the rate of them able to throw a baseball or a softball. So it's always good to find out from the families if they do have an older brother or sister. I know I had 2 older brothers and they were a big influence in me playing sports when I was very young. Okay, I mentioned use soft-covered balls. I am of the belief, and some people frown upon this, you could use sponge balls. For younger kids, you could use, I like rolled up socks. You could use bean bags. Right here, I just want to mention, and I missed this in the introduction, one of the biggest challenges you're going to have is that you're going to be coaching some, it could be as young as 4-year-olds and as high as 7-year-olds. But whatever age group the disparity is, if you could recognize the skill level, you may want to divide the team up according to the skill level and have multiple drills or multiple stations. And what you do when you do this is the older or more skilled kids, they won't be as bored in certain drills. Now, this isn't today. You shouldn't have drills that the whole team participates in. You should. But for the most part, if you can divide by the skill level, it's going to be better for you as a coach and for your assistant coaches and better for the players themselves. So keep that in mind. When kids are throwing, you want to look at the movement of the head, and I alluded to this just a second ago when they throw wildly. If the player has a head that's more steady and less movement, he has a tendency to throw a better ball. If the player's head is moving all the way around, the ball is going to go wild. And one of the drills which I have in my book, T-ball drills, is we put a baseball glove on the player's head and we tell them to throw the ball without the glove falling off. This is effective in some kids. In some kids, it's not that effective, but that's a nice little tidbit there. As far as a technique, kids don't bring their arm all the way back. You want to try to work on that. We're going to address that because some of the kids don't recognize when they're bringing their arm all the way back. You want them to use the whole body. Some kids don't. When I mean the whole body, I don't mean just the arms and the head and the shoulders, but the legs and the hips, everything. And you want them to hold the ball on top. That's preferably, but I actually don't think it's that important in T-ball. And you'll see the first drill, though, we are getting the players to hold it on top, which is something like this. Now, some of these kids have very small hands, but if you have a soft covered T-ball, when they squeeze it, they'll be able to hold it with their fingers on top. Again, it's preferred, but doesn't have to be an absolute thing. And don't spend too much time on it. I use the expression, we don't want to overcoach and underteach the kids. We have a tendency sometimes to overcoach, and we're not teaching them the correct fundamentals, okay? A lot of times as coaches, we're talking too much. We want to limit the amount of our talking that we're doing to the kids. Let them do the activity, all right? Another thing I'll mention is I learned over the years, if kids are making numerous mistakes, either throwing, either catching, either batting, if you correct one mistake, sometimes that takes care of some other mistakes that they're doing, all right? Now, with that said, I want to stop right here. If you guys are new coaches, don't feel intimidated that you don't know baseball as much as I do. I have a master's in phys ed, but I'll be honest with you. I learned the game of baseball from the ground up when I started coaching. I knew how to follow baseball on TV and follow my glorious New York Yankees. But I cut my teeth when I started coaching T-ball, when I learned from some other coaches, more experienced coaches, and I recommend you should do that. Seek these experienced coaches out, ask them questions. I was a shy guy, and I got more outspoken the older I got, but I had no problem picking up the phone. I went to the local high school. I went to some coaches that had been around a long time. I even went up to West Point, New York, after I spoke to the baseball coach and I observed the practice. So you want to seek out other coaches, whatever skill you're teaching the kids, okay? And develop your own theory, too. I used to go to these baseball clinics. I'd come out of these talks on pitching, and I'd say, wow, that guy's right. And I'd go to one right afterward, and I'd come out and say, well, that guy's right too. And they had two different theories. You want to be able to absorb different theories and come up with your own. And the idea I want to give you is try to keep it as simple as possible for you to understand and for you to be able to convey to other kids. Okay, now the first drill, if you scroll down, and excuse my eyes for wandering because I'm looking at the screen, you'll see the ball drag drill. Excellent drill where you could sit the players down and spread them out. And again, on this drill, they're not using their feet. But what this drill is doing, and I'll just read it right here, right from the text. In this drill, we are pointing out to T-ball players that throwing uses both the upper and lower part of the body. As the player drags the ball from in front of them to behind them, the fingers or hand has to be on top of the ball, which it will be naturally. Sitting also encourages the players to bring the ball back behind them. Now, if you look at the picture, you'll see the second picture, it's behind him. It should be a little further back. And he picks it up and he throws it. And for whatever reason, when the player is sitting down, and I mentioned head movement, the head movement naturally is limited. Okay, so that's one drill. I'm going to go right to another drill, the freestanding bench drill. In this drill, our goal is to help kids bring their arms all the way back behind their body. Lying down on a freestanding bench will utilize gravity. So many kids don't know what it feels like to bring their arm all the way back. Okay? And I put something there, the progression of motor skills will vary among young players. I touched upon that. And below that, you'll see I have a definition of motor skills. And if you get technical, there are gross motor skills and fine motor skills. You don't have to know any of that. If you coach baseball for 30 years, you still don't have to know that. Trust me. Okay. But the reason I came up with the freestanding bench is because some players really, they don't know how it feels to bring their arm back. And the freestanding bench, the gravity is helping them bring their arm back. Now, I'll tell you, and I tell other coaches when I do these live coaching clinics, don't go out and buy 12 freestanding benches. Excuse me. I use one that was at the school, right at practice, and it worked great. And if you can't find access to a bench, if they have bleachers, the lowest bench on the bleachers, if it's high enough off the ground, you could basically do the same thing, all right? You're going to have to twist them around if they're lefty or righty, but you could do it. The coach stands at the end of the bench and the player tosses him the ball. And they get to feel the arm go all the way back. Great technique. Consider using it. The one thing I'll tell you, if you do use the freestanding bench and you have different stations, if players are at other stations and they see the bench, even if they're great throws, they're going to want to try it. It's one of those things. One thing I learned, and for you coaches, just remember this, kids love using props. Kids love using props. And we're going to get into that in a separate module about the props. All right. Next drill I put in is a line throw drill. And the reason I put this in, I use this drill all the way up. I've coached 15 and 16-year-olds. I have 2 rows of baseballs. The coach usually, and doesn't have a spot in the picture, is in the middle. He points to one baseball at third base, or he points to the line. The player picks it up, throws it to first, and have a coach at first base. After he throws it, he gets to the end of the next line. And then you point, you go to the player at the shortstop line. Couple of things here. First of all, you want to shorten the drill according to the age group. So if you look at the picture, it's even okay to have the lines further up, and you have the coach at first base. He should be further down the line, so it's a shorter throw. Another thing is, I like to tell the T-ball players, try to get it to the coach at first base on a bounce. Even the players that can throw in a fly, let them throw it on a bounce the first time around, just so that it puts them at the same level as the new players. Again, your biggest challenge is going to be returning T-ball players. Okay, so that's another drill. And let me just read this. In this drill, we are getting players to throw to a target. Right. A coach must be at first base. He can be down the line so the throw is not as far. Have players make the throw in a bounce, even the kids that can reach on a fly. Always be flexible to shorten the field and coach to the age of the kids. Simply. All right, next drill is the flip wrist drill. You have the kids hold their arm like in a right angle. Again, you and me know the right angle is they don't. You could set it up. This is where you need volunteers because you want them to, each volunteer, maybe to have either one-on-one or one-on-two. And the benefit of this is, I call it, and it's called wrist flexor. Some of the kids never do this. They don't know how it feels. So they take a bucket of balls, one at a time, arm at a right angle, and they flip it against the fence. Great drill. A lot of T-ball coaches won't even do this. I recommend you do it. The next drill is more of a follow-up to the same drill. It's the forward wrist flip and elbow. Player is on the same knee as the throwing arm. The elbow is at a right angle. Again, we know what it is, but they don't. We have to show them. A lot of times young players will rush this drill, making it competitive. Like my flicking the ball went further than yours. You could put out a target to stop that. All right? So they're like this, and they're flicking the ball. Another good drill. They're getting a good feel of the wrist flexor, and this works. Again, kids aren't going to do this for 20 minutes. You could take 2 or 3 minutes. You could throw it into space and make sure you separate the kids. All right, moving down, the lie-down throwing drill. This is very similar to the freestanding bench. And I put, in actuality, the motion is inhibited because the ground becomes the starting position. So they can't bring it back, all right? And you might say to me, well, Marty, you keep saying you have to bring it back. They do, but just read on. This will still help the complete motion. It's all in the process of having the young players develop the correct habits. By lying down and starting with the arm straight, the chances are the arm will come forward in the correct manner. So the key in this drill is not having the elbow veer out to the side. You want to have it straight. So they're like this, lying down, and you want to have it go straight. They could throw into space, but I prefer to have a coach at the foot, like we did at the freestanding bench, throwing it to the coach. Okay, it's a good drill. It's a simple drill. It works. Move to the next drill, basketball throwing drill. The biggest benefit of this really is that it just helps with the player's footwork. All right? So if they have a basketball, because it's so big, they'll hold it with 2 hands. They basically almost have to wind up, and you could demonstrate. If the ball is too big for a lot of players that have smaller hands, you could get a smaller ball. You know, I don't know, they have these size 3 or 4 soccer balls. They have even cheaper balls. But you don't have to use a basketball, but if they can use a basketball, use a basketball. Fence throwing drill. All right, this is a drill I just want to point out, mainly for older kids. And the reason I put it in, you'll find kids with throwing, they'll end up throwing it sidearm, not what we call like over the top. When you're next to a fence, or the kid's next to a fence, your player, he'll know psychologically he can't throw out, because if he throws out like sidearm, his arm will hit the fence. If he's next to a fence, he's got to come over the top, throw over the top. If you're doing this, use a little more liberal space when you start. You could start with liberal spacing and move a little towards the fence. Again, T-ball, younger kids, it might be a little too young. This is a great drill just to file it away in your head when the kids are older, and you can try it in T-ball. All right, next drill, moving down. Technique throwing, we're going to end up with this. I try to give you as much detail as I could. It's right from my book, T-ball Drills. And if you look at the pictures, and I'll read it, and we're breaking down the throw, and we want to use a bucket of balls for each player or have balls at their feet. Many first-time T-ball coaching parents don't really have the first clue about teaching throwing technique to T-ball players. In this drill, we're taking apart the throwing technique and teaching key points to players to help them remember how to throw. Again, help them remember means you want to do repetitions. Muscle memory on good techniques will reward players long-term getting them into good habits, okay? Players should be in a straight line next to each other. That's very spread out. All players should have a number of baseballs. One ball, the player starts and comes to a T with both arms spread out. The front shoulder, I'm lefty, non-throwing shoulder, will be pointed in the direction the players are throwing to. Righters will have the left shoulder, and lefties have the right shoulder at the target. On the go command, the players bring their hands together. At this point, the next step is to spread their hands out again with their front foot opposite of the throwing hand. It's going to be moving toward, I lost my spot. Be pointing in the direction the players are throwing. Righties have the left shoulder and lefties have the right shoulder. On the go command, the players bring their hands together again. At this point, next step is to spread the hands out again in front of the opposite foot. I might have lost my spot, bear with me. The throwing hand should move in a slow motion. At this point, when they bring it up, and again, if I skip the point, just read this slowly. The coach yells stop. The player should look at their throwing hand and see the knuckleball or the knuckles of the ball are facing away from the target. Okay? As the player brings their hands up, the front foot should step or open up, pointing to the target. The player will continue, and the arm should continue with the full circle. The throwing arm should be fairly close to the player's head, and with the elbow at shoulder length. Very important, by the way, not so much in T-ball, but as coaches, remember, when you have pitchers, whatever, you want to try to make sure their elbow is about not any lower than the shoulder. When it begins to drop, if your player's like 12 years old and he's a pitcher, that will show him a tendency of getting tired. If the elbow stays up, that's good. All right. The throwing arm should be fairly close to the player's head. Players let go of the ball when it is in front of them. Read this, look at the picture, and try to follow. Try to do it yourself in front of a mirror. So I'm going to wrap up the throwing module. Okay, go through it. As far as related resources, somebody already emailed me and they wanted me to integrate some of my video clips into this virtual clinic. I just am not capable of doing that. I'm really challenged technology-wise. After the virtual clinic, I have a list of all my videos, and I'm going to talk about it, but I make them as free as possible. They're free on Amazon Prime, but related to throwing, you might want to view the video T-ball skills and drills. It's free on Amazon Prime, and it's free through your library through Hoopla and Canopy. You might want to view fielding drills and techniques. Also, the book I just mentioned, T-ball drills. But all that's going to be at the end, and I'll get into that. I didn't want to really make like I'm overselling. So that's it for the throw module, and I'm going to take a little break, and I'm going to come back. I think the next one is catching and fielding, so I'll see you in a couple of minutes.